I am Terry Nagel. I'm chair of the board of Sustainable San Mateo County, and I want to welcome you to the webinar about the landmark Trump versus Lighthiser case. In this case, you'll see that 22 young plaintiffs ranging in age from 7 to 26 are challenging 3 of President Trump's executive orders, which were to unleash fossil fuels, block renewable energy, and suppress climate science. They're questioning the separation of powers and whether the president has the power to act on his own initiative without any regard for the powers of the other branches of government. So tonight we're going to have a brief introduction to SSMC, and then we will introduce our 3 speakers. And at the end, we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers. And in this photo, you can also see the youngest plaintiff in the bottom. He's age 7, so it is quite a range of ages for these young people. I want to thank our co-sponsors for tonight. So Our Children's Trust is our program partner. They are the wonderful organization behind this whole effort to get climate justice for young people. Our promotion partners are 350 Silicon Valley, Actera, Citizens Environmental Council, the San Mateo County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Group. And now I want to tell you just a little bit about our organization for those of you who don't know about us. Sustainable San Mateo County is a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 1992 to help make our county more sustainable. We focus on helping local leaders adopt new policies to accelerate sustainability progress. And by the way, we're not just talking about environmental issues here. We also believe that the economy and social equity have to be in balance along with the environment to have true sustainability. Those are what we call the 3 E's of sustainability. And next slide, please. What we do is quite a few things. We're very proud of it. We inform local leaders and the public by providing data showing progress by all 20 cities and the county itself on more than 90 sustainability metrics. And we share proven sustainability solutions that have been adopted successfully elsewhere so that these jurisdictions can advance progress on sustainability faster. I think we are unique in these 2 programs that we have. We research one critical sustainability issue each year and provide an in-depth report that includes recommendations for improvement. And this year, our report, which will be launched next week, October 1st, you're invited to come. This year, it will focus on how food and food waste systems remain an untapped area in local climate planning. Our free indicators report launch is October 1st, and we hope you will join us. We inspire action by celebrating local sustainability heroes each year with our Sustainability Awards and Green Building Award, and we have a fairly new Youth Sustainability Award as well. Applications for those are due October 14th. And we're also training the next generation of sustainability leaders with our internships, our Youth Advisory Council, and our youth advocacy training programs. And we are accepting new applications for the Youth Advisory Council from students throughout San Mateo County until September 30th. And now I'd like to introduce our 3 speakers. With us tonight is Phil Gregory, who has served as counsel with Our Children's Trust on a pro bono basis since 2010, while maintaining his own law practice with the Gregory Law Group in Redwood City. He's represented cases on issues including groundwater contamination, flooding during Hurricane Katrina, preserving old growth forests, and saving coho salmon. And with Our Children's Trust, he served as co-lead counsel in Juliana versus United States. He also was co-lead trial counsel for Held versus Montana, in which young people sued Montana. Some of you may remember our in-person event featuring Phil and two plaintiffs from Held versus Montana 2 years ago. Eva Lighthiser is the lead plaintiff in this case. She grew up in Livingston, Montana, where rivers, forests, and mountains shaped her life. She was previously a young plaintiff in Held versus Montana, which was the first youth-led constitutional climate case to go to trial and secure a groundbreaking victory affirming the constitutional right of young Montanans to a clean and healthy environment. Eva is passionate about climate action and plans to focus on environmental studies in college. And finally, Delaney Reynolds is a fourth-generation Miami resident. She began advocating for climate rights at age 14, and she's the founder and CEO of a Florida-based environmental nonprofit called the Sink or Swim Project. She served as the lead plaintiff in a 2018 youth-led climate change lawsuit, Reynolds versus the state of Florida, and she was involved in a successful rulemaking petition that resulted in the first statewide renewable energy goals for the state of California. She's currently the lead plaintiff in the youth-led case Reynolds versus Florida Public Service Commission. Delaney has a BS degree in marine and atmospheric science from the University of Miami, and she's currently completing JD and PhD programs in ecological research and marine biodiversity with the University of Miami. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Phil. It's all yours. Oh, we can't hear you. Your volume's off. Right.
Thanks, Terry. And on behalf of Delaney and Ava, I wanted to thank not only our participating partners for allowing us to do this, but a special help from Terry and from Molly of Sustainable San Mateo County. So with that, we're going to begin the presentation on what the case Lighthiser versus Trump means. But before we do that, I wanted to quickly explain what our Children's Trust is. Our Children's Trust is a nonprofit based in Eugene, Oregon, that's been representing youth against governments since 2010. And we advocate for these youth voices only for science-based and climate action and enforceable systemic remedies. We seek to protect fundamental human rights. And our North Star case includes Brown versus Board of Education. And here we have the youth plaintiffs in the Brown case, along with the three-judge trial panel and the United States Supreme Court. And Brown, as we all know, essentially went after the systemic problem of segregation in schools, and we're going after the systemic problem of the climate crisis. We have cases all over the United States. Here you can see some of them. We also have a brand new case in Wisconsin, and we have Delaney's case down in Florida. Internationally, we've just filed a petition with the Organization of American States, and we also have actions proceeding in a number of countries, including our first foreign trials going to occur next year in Canada in the case LaRose versus the King. If you want to know more about our Children's Trust and our other cases, particularly a case called Juliana versus United States, there's a documentary on Netflix, Youth v. Gov. It won a number of awards, as you can see here, and I highly recommend you see it. Not only you see it, but your children, your grandchildren see it, because it's an enlightening movie about how we're using the courts, the third branch of government, to essentially protect youth, the rights of youth, and the climate. So what's the case Lighthiser versus Trump all about? Well, in May of this year, 22 youth from across the country brought a case against the Trump administration and federal agencies, asserting violations of their constitutional rights to life, health, and safety. Essentially, what we're challenging are the administration's executive orders unleashing fossil fuels. And we're stating in our case that these executive orders exacerbate the climate crisis and worsen the youth plaintiffs' climate and health injuries. These executive orders are listed here, start with 14154, 14156, and 14213. And essentially what these orders are doing is they declared a national energy emergency and are trying to promote domestic fossil fuel production and unwind what's been done regarding renewable energy production by increasing extraction, production, transportation of fossil fuels in the United States. So these orders expressly are trying not only this, and this is an important point for later, unleashing America's fossil fuels, but I'm going to call it squelching, if not killing, renewable energy. And last week we had a hearing in Missoula Federal Court on September 16 and 17 before federal judge Dana Christensen. And for the first time ever, a federal judge heard live testimony in a constitutional climate case led by young people addressing two critical motions. One, our motion to enjoin or stop the implementation of these unconstitutional executive orders, and the government's motion to dismiss the case. And I should add that there were states, red states, and Guam, who joined the effort as what are called intervener defendants. We started off the hearing with testimony from 4 youth plaintiffs. Joseph, who described heat stroke hospitalization and how the federal funding cuts are eliminating his research opportunities. Georgia, she spoke about preparing to watch Montana burn while she's also experiencing the loss of an EPA grant for school electric buses. Avery described the fleeing multiple hurricanes during her college years down in Florida, saying that she can't imagine bringing more life into this world that's so uncertain. Jeff, age 11, shared a terrifying moment he noticed with his little brother's shallow breathing and watched him get rushed to the hospital as a result of the poor air quality they have to live with. And the last witness in the hearing was 17-year-old Isaiah, who testified about worsening wildfire smoke and decreased snowpack in Montana. We had a number of expert witnesses, Steve Running, who testified about that every additional ton of CO2 matters to the plaintiffs. Dr. Lori Byron, a pediatrician, who warned of the grave health risk by unleashing more fossil fuels. Dr. Jeffrey Heal from Columbia, an environmental economist, showed how renewable energy is essentially less expensive than fossil fuels, and the cost of burning such fossil fuel energy as coal. And Dr. Mark Jacobson from Stanford, he proved that renewable energy can reliably power the entire United States. We also had Nicole Hughes, the executive director of Renewable Northwest, who testified about what's happening to the renewable energy projects as a result of these orders. They're all being canceled, and they won't be able to get off the ground for years if these orders are upheld. And finally, John Podesta, former White House chief of staff and climate director, and he drew on his service under 4 presidents, essentially ending his testimony by stating how these kids are being harmed by the executive orders and that the courts need to do something about that. So we introduced a substantial amount of evidence that the executive orders were endangering young people's lives and violating their constitutional rights. The federal and state governments chose not to present a single witness, not one witness. So there was no factual or evidentiary support for the emergency that these orders were based on. So we proved at the hearing that every ton of fossil fuel pollution unleashed under the orders harms these young people, that wind and solar are the cheapest forms of energy, that stopping renewables will itself create an energy emergency, that climate science, because again, these orders are cutting the funding for climate science and reporting, that how these climate science and reporting are necessary to protect our country, and how rescinding the endangerment finding on greenhouse gas pollution is dangerous and must be stopped. In closing arguments, Julia Olson, who's the executive director and founder of our Children's Trust, warned about how these executive orders are harming the youth plaintiffs now and could cut their youth short. She reminded the judge that there are moments of great challenge, and those moments require judicial courage, again, pointing to Brown versus Board of Education. She urged Judge Christensen to stop these unconstitutional actions and enjoin the executive orders. The defendants argued essentially that the plaintiffs are not entitled to an order because it would require the court to resolve an energy policy dispute. At stake here is, in essence, whether or not fossil fuels will be unleashed and renewables killed, or whether the courts will find, based on the evidence that was submitted, that these orders are harming youth and that the orders themselves should be declared unconstitutional. So we've got other actions moving across the country, like I said, at the state level in Wisconsin, in Florida. We just filed a new petition in the Organization of American States, and we're continuing to allow the youth to have their voices heard, and it is so crucial. This slide here, this is my granddaughter Alice on my shoulders with Kelsey Juliana, the lead plaintiff in Juliana versus the United States. And at some point, Alice and her brothers, Lincoln and John Jr., are going to ask me, Papa, what did you do during the climate wars? And I want to be able to look both Alice and her brothers in the eye and say, you know what? I did everything. I volunteered my time. I gave my heart and soul to protect our climate. And with that, I'd like to now turn it back over to Terry and the incredible youth plaintiffs we have with us, Ava and Delaney.
Great, thank you, Phil. That was really interesting. We will have lots of time for questions after our 2 plaintiffs present their presentations. And now we are switching over to Eva Lighthiser. And go, Eva.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eva, as she mentioned, and I'd like to just start off by saying how grateful I am that all of you are here. It's so encouraging to us youth plaintiffs when people show up to events and people show an interest in learning about these cases. It's always really exciting to see. I think I'll start with, just kind of some backstory. Having grown up in rural Montana, there was a lot of emphasis on the outdoors, my natural surroundings growing up, being surrounded by mountains and landscapes and wildlife and wilderness. I spent a lot of time out there, and over the course of my childhood, I began to witness firsthand the impacts of the climate crisis. It started, with wildfires. At this point in Montana, wildfire season is kind of, it's a season of its own. And having experienced, wildfire smoke permeating the air all summer long, and, just always having this shortness of breath, and having sore throats and runny noses, and um, experiencing that has been really, disheartening because it makes you wonder what, you know, how is this going to be exacerbated moving forward? I've also experienced, various flooding events. When I was 12 or 13, I lived outside of town a ways. I lived just north of Yellowstone National Park, and I had to cross a bridge in order to get into town. And when that bridge was collapsed after a flooding event, my family would then have to drive into the neighboring county in order to come back into town, and that was a stress on our family, a financial burden, and um, it was a factor in us moving into town a little later on. Um, and just a couple years ago, the Yellowstone River flooded in a really devastating way. It flooded a whole lot of my hometown, and coming from a very small community, there's not a lot of resources or infrastructure to deal with an event like that. And so that was very stressful for me and my community. I remember the day that the flood happened, hearing that there was going to be over 50,000 CFS of river water coming right through town. Um, I ran over to our local fairgrounds and started filling up sandbags. Um, and over the course of the rest of the day, me and a whole bunch of community members got together and were filling sandbags for hours and hours on end as people came and picked them up to protect their houses against the flood. And, these experiences with the climate crisis caused me a lot of anxiety and worry about my future and the very uncertain environment young people are being thrown into. So, when I initially heard about our children's trust, I was really interested in getting involved. As Terry mentioned before, I was a youth plaintiff in the Healthy Montana lawsuit, which was a really, really incredible experience, because Held um, had the opportunity to go to trial, and we had a full week of plaintiff and witness testimony that was just incredible and really exciting, as well as very nerve-wracking. Testifying in court for the first time was absolutely terrifying, and um, there was a lot of growth in that moment. But getting onto the stand and simply just telling my story was a really special experience. And it's so, so important that young people use our voices because they are our strongest tools. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from the experience with Held. Following the trial, we were appealed by the defendants to the Montana Supreme Court. We had an oral argument and then later won in a 6-to-1 ratio ruling in our favor at the Montana Supreme Court just this past December. And that was incredibly exciting to have our voices affirmed and validated by the courts. In the district court, Judge Kathy Seeley, who was our judge during trial, she said that, every additional ton of CO2 um, is violating the constitutional rights of these youth plaintiffs. And that was incredibly powerful to hear. Fast forward to this past May, we filed Lighthiser v. Trump, and as Phil kind of touched on, um, we just had this hearing, and that was a really incredible experience too. I didn't testify this time, so I got to be there and support everybody as they testified, and they all did such a wonderful job. It requires a lot of bravery, and I'm always so proud of my co-plaintiffs and everything that they've done, and they're so well spoken, and um, getting the chance to have a hearing like this in the federal court is so exciting. And kind of moving forward, I'm optimistic and excited to kind of hear what Judge Christensen's ruling is going to be like. It's in the meantime, I people like Delaney and I will be using our voices and talking about the case, and just generally kind of waiting, fingers crossed. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the overview. Once again, like thank you all so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Eva. We're very proud of you for going in front of all those people and doing the testimony that you've done. You've done a wonderful job. And now we will turn it over to Delaney, who has her own personal story to tell us.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. As you heard, my name is Delaney. Thank you to Terry, Molly, and everyone at Sustainable San Mateo County for having us here. And thank you to Phil and Eva for always your incredible work and comments tonight. And to echo Eva, thank you to all of you for joining us and learning more about our historic climate lawsuit. So I'd like to start by saying that I did not join this case because I dreamed of suing the President of the United States. Honestly, I wish that I didn't have to do this at all. But when your home, your future, and your right to live safely are on the line, you don't just sit back, you stand up. So as you heard, I am the fourth generation of my family, born in Miami, Florida, but I also grew up splitting my time between this very cosmopolitan city and a small 1,000-acre island in the Florida Keys called No Name Key, which is in the middle of 2 wildlife refuges and only has 40 solar-powered homes, so it's very special. And thus, my life growing up has been surrounded by water, and I spent most of my time outside, swimming, snorkeling, biking, and hiking. And the reefs and the beaches, like Matheson Hammock, where you see me pictured here eating a French fry, and where I learned how to swim, they weren't just places to visit, but they were and they continue to be part of who I am. And in fact, growing up in these natural environments inspired me to write 3 children's books at a young age. And by the time I was 14, I realized that these places that I love are in real danger from climate change. So I decided to learn as much about climate science as I could. I started speaking out and ultimately founded a nonprofit entitled the Sink or Swim Project, through which I became involved in climate education and political advocacy to help do everything that I can to protect the memories and places that you see in these pictures. And that's also how I learned about the incredible work that our Children's Trust does at the age of 16 and became involved in Reynolds versus the state of Florida, the rulemaking petition and renewable energy rule with the Department of Agriculture, Reynolds versus Florida Public Service Commission, and now, of course, Lighthiser versus Trump. My love for nature also inspired me to pursue an education in marine science. And so, as you heard, I obtained my Bachelor of Science in Marine Science and Geology and have since been in a dual degree program where I earned my law degree with a focus in environmental law last year. And I'm now working on finishing up my PhD studying climate adaptation solutions here in South Florida. So I have truly dedicated my life to learning as much as I can about our natural environment so that I can also, in turn, educate others and work hard using fact-based science to protect it. Next slide, please. So this slide tells the other side of the story, what much of my home often looks like today. So these aren't just abstract risks for me, they are a lived reality. I have seen sunny day flooding turn Miami streets into rivers. In fact, Miami has actually seen an almost 400% increase in sunny day tidal flooding since 2006 in my lifetime. So that's flooding on perfectly clear days, like you can see here in these pictures, just from higher seas pushing water through our streets. And projections actually show that by 2050, sea levels around Miami could rise another 10 to 17 inches, which would turn what we currently call just nuisance flooding into a chronic daily reality. I've also been experiencing the extreme heat where we have multiple days per year well over 100 degrees. In fact, Florida ranks among the hottest states in the United States, and climate projections show that if fossil fuel use expands unchecked, then Miami could experience up to 130 heat index days over 100 degrees every year by 2050, and I'll be just 50 years old by then. So that's months at a time during my lifetime where it could be unsafe to work outside, go for a run, or even walk or bike to school like I currently do. And that's not just uncomfortable, but it's deadly, especially for children, seniors, and outdoor workers. And for also a place that thrives on tourism and outdoor life like Florida, it's also very devastating for our economy. And then associated with that extreme heat, I have swum over coral reefs that I've watched become bleached and die because of record ocean temperatures that have also reached over 100 degrees. In 2023, we had a marine heat wave in the Florida Keys that killed an estimated 70 to 90% of corals across parts of the Florida Reef Tract, which is the third largest coral reef system in the entire world. And without those reefs, communities just like mine face even higher risks from more flooding, erosion, and storm surge from hurricanes. And in fact, there's a couple pictures here where you can see my family's home in the Keys was damaged during Hurricane Irma, and storms like that are only getting stronger. In my lifetime alone, the Atlantic Basin has already seen a 5-fold increase in Category 4 and 5 hurricanes compared to the mid-20th century. Of course, warmer ocean water means storms intensify faster, gives people less time to prepare, and the higher seas mean that we get even more destructive storm surge on top of that. And now it's also not just storms. In the last few years, wildfire smoke has drifted all the way down into Florida from Canada, and we've even experienced wildfires of our own down in the Florida Keys, which I'm sure many of you from California can unfortunately relate to. So the climate crisis is everywhere now, and it's already shaping how I live my life. And that's why these executive orders that we are challenging hit so hard. On his first day back in office, President Trump told the federal government to unleash fossil fuels, block clean energy, and silence climate science. And for me, that's not politics, it's personal. Every single one of those actions makes my life more dangerous. When the president orders the federal government to unleash fossil fuels, it isn't just a slogan in an executive order. It means more offshore oil drilling leases, more permits for gas pipelines, and more coal plant exemptions, including here in Florida. And for a low-lying state like ours, that's absolutely catastrophic. Every additional ton of greenhouse gases accelerates sea level rise. By mid-century, parts of Miami Beach, Key West, and the Everglades, which is the only habitat of its type on planet Earth, could see chronic flooding that makes the environment and neighborhoods unlivable for people and animals alike. In the Florida Keys, even a foot of additional sea level rise would actually drown critical habitat for the endangered key deer, which there was a picture of on my last slide. And that's one of the species that is unique to our home down there. At the same time, like I said, these executive orders are blocking renewable energy and efficiency programs, and Florida has some of the highest solar potential in the nation, and solar is already cheaper than fossil fuels here, yet we are ranking far below our capacity because of utility resistance and weak state policies. But instead of helping us forge forward in the transition, the federal government is pulling the rug out from under programs that could lower costs and create jobs. And that slows down the spread of rooftop solar, battery storage, and energy efficiency measures that would cut emissions. So when I think about it, you think about the Sunshine State, which is what Florida is called. The sun shines here almost year round. And yet our government is prioritizing natural gas over solar, which is not just short-sighted, it's reckless. And then the last element of the lawsuit is that these executive orders are attacking science and suppressing it. And as a PhD student studying climate resilience, I rely on federal data and research like the National Climate Assessment that has been taken down from all government websites. And agencies like NOAA and NASA play a critical role in monitoring hurricanes, sea level rise, and coral reef health. But this administration is dismantling those programs, taking away the science that helps protect communities like mine. Obviously, Florida historically relies heavily on those models, not only to alert and warn communities before disasters like hurricanes strike, but also to design infrastructure and manage fisheries. But by dismantling or suppressing these research programs, the executive orders are effectively blinding us to the threats that we face. So those are some of the many reasons why these executive orders are not just bad policy, but they're unconstitutional. They knowingly endanger people like me and Eva and millions of other Floridians, Montanans, and Americans who will live with the consequences for the rest of our lives. Now, I do want to mention that many people rightfully see this as my friends and I expressing concern for the environment in a warming world, which is true. But this case is at least equally about our Fifth Amendment constitutional rights to life and liberty, not only for my friends and I, but for all the generations to come. Presidents are not above the law. Even in an emergency, of which this is not an energy emergency, it is a climate emergency, presidents cannot trample on the Constitution. They cannot override Congress or sacrifice our lives for fossil fuel profits. So if we win, the court will stop these unconstitutional orders, protecting not only the 22 of us that are bringing this case, but also millions of other young people across the United States. And it will send a very clear message, and that is that the United States Constitution protects children's rights to a safe climate future. So, 3 things that I hope this case accomplishes. First, that the court recognizes that young people have the right to a safe climate. That should be a given, but here we are. The state of Montana, as Eva mentioned, has done that. Let's hope that our federal court system will do that as well. Second, I hope that the court makes it clear that no matter the president, no matter who they are, they cannot put children in danger just to bolster fossil fuel pollution and profits. And finally, I hope that our case inspires others to stand up. Like I said, I was only 14 when I started this work. I couldn't even vote yet. But at a very early age, I learned that democracy includes us, the youngest generation. We all have a voice, and when we use it, it matters. And so in this case, we are using our voice. We are asking for protection of our constitutional rights and of our environment, for the right to breathe clean air, to live in safe homes, to drink safe water, inherit a livable planet, and live without fear that our government is making this crisis worse. So that's what this case is about, and that's why I'm standing in court alongside Eva and my other fellow plaintiffs, and why we will keep fighting for the generations who come after us. So thank you all once again for having us.
Wow. I want to thank you all for your eloquence and your passion and your courage to bring this on. And I think you can tell from all the reactions floating up on the screen how impressed everybody is. So thank you so much. At this point, we can share the screens of everyone, I think, and open it up for Q&A. We encourage you to put your questions in the chat, or also you can just unmute yourself and speak up, and we'll let you know if we can hear you. We want to start by asking, first of all, a question about why you think so many young people are affected by this revolution, if you will. Why are so many people your age taking this so much more seriously than some of the older folks? And any of you may answer that.
I think, our generation, specifically, climate change is only continuing to get worse. And right now, our futures are very uncertain. Delaney spoke of this, and I touched on this as well. I think we've experienced firsthand the impact of climate change, and seeing that and witnessing that has given us an extra, sense of urgency. The time to act really is now. We don't really have time, so it's kind of essential.
Do you think that working on this issue has made you feel like you're better, like you're doing something about it instead of worrying about it all the time? Is it really helpful to get involved?
So I think, as they say, like the cure to depression is action. So I think that, taking action has really, improved my mental health regarding climate change. And knowing that as young people, even though when I first joined Help Be Montana, I also couldn't vote. I was 14. So um, it's it's really empowering to know that our voices can create change and in a real tangible way. So that does, I feel like, help a little bit, but it doesn't take away, that sense of urgency, that need to take action, right?
Yeah, Eva's totally right. And another aspect is that one thing about being a part of these cases is that we're not just bringing climate science and our testimonies into the courtroom, but we're also bringing it to the general public, like in a webinar event like this, or through journal articles, like the New York Times, for which we have a journalist here tonight, which is really cool. Thank you for joining us. So we're bringing these really complex topics related to climate science and educating people about them. So not only are we trying to do something in the court, but we're also raising awareness about climate change and how people are being impacted, which is really important as well.
I think
Right,
it's
and
really important, Terry, excuse me, I think it's really
yeah.
important for everyone to recognize how difficult it is for these youth to be plaintiffs. It's not just them putting their name on a piece of paper. We spent a lot of time talking with each a plaintiff about their background so that we can develop their story for purposes of the complaint, the document you filed to initiate a lawsuit. They filed or prepared declarations that are in depth about their climate injuries and what they're seeing, which is very difficult for some people, the anxiety level of what they're seeing, and translating that into a declaration. They're testify and they get cross-examined by senior attorneys with the Department of Justice and various state attorney general's office. So none of this is easy for them to do. But I believe, and I believe Eva and Delaney would say this as well, by doing this, the action gives hope. And it not only gives hope to them, but it gives hope to other youth, because they don't see our generation, the geezer generation, really doing anything effective about fossil fuel emissions or anything along those lines. So they're going to do it themselves. They're going to solve the problem, because if they waited for us to do it, for our president to do it, or many governors to do it, or the legislature or Congress, it would never happen. So it has to happen through the courts.
Excellent. And I will tell you, you are getting lots of publicity because I have a Google alert set up for the case. And boy, there's articles every day on what you're doing. So you're doing a great job of getting the word out. We have a lot of questions coming in. One of them is, how have you successfully responded to climate deniers? What advice do you have?
That's a really good question. So I think it depends on the forum. If it's online, I choose not to engage. It's just a waste of time, in my opinion. If it's in person, you're approached by someone and having a healthy conversation, I stick to the science. This is a scientific issue. It's not a political issue. Every single person in this world and in this country is going to be impacted by climate change. Climate change isn't Republican. It's not Democrat. It doesn't see red. It doesn't see blue. People are going to be impacted. So I stick to the science and I tell them what's been happening and how I've been personally impacted. And if they still don't agree with that, that's fine. They're not the target audience of people that I want to be working with. There are people out there that do want to work on climate change solutions, like all of my fellow plaintiffs and the incredible attorneys like Phil that we work with. And those are the kind of people that you need to look for and work with and support.
Great answer.
I also want to say that in the Held case, we did have a supposed climate scientist who was going to testify for the state. She refused to get on the witness stand and testify. As a result, there was no climate science denier or saying this, the science. is not as we put our climate experts on. And as we all know, in fake news, in the news, there's no repercussions, but fake news in the courtroom, that's perjury. And so they won't get up there and testify.
Right. Good point. Good point. Absolutely. I see people asking if we will furnish a copy of the recording. Yes, you will all get a copy when we have it posted on YouTube. We'll share that with you as well. And another question was, okay, for Phil, will the International Court of Justice's recent opinion regarding obligations of states related to climate change help your cases in the US? I'm not familiar with that. Are you?
Yes, in fact, we just filed a petition with the Organization of American States, building off that opinion. And what we did is we took the principles in Juliana. We noted that our initial federal case that asserted the constitutional rights of under the Fifth Amendment and various other theories, such as the public trust doctrine. And now we've turned that into a petition relying on that opinion. It's an opinion that came out about the responsibility of states, and we're using that. And for those of you, I'll send to Terry and Molly a copy of the petition that we just filed, and we can circulate all that. It's fascinating reading. It was really well done, and we've included many of the same plaintiffs from the Juliana case, because what you have to do is you have to exhaust your nation's judicial system before you can turn to the procedures under the OAS. So we've done that in Juliana, and that's why we're moving forward with this new petition.
And while we're on the topic of the international cases, I believe I've been hearing that there are lots of groups that are going to the courts around the world. Is that true, Phil? Are there other cases around the world?
Oh, yes, there's cases around the world. Again, you get to the what are going to be effective measures. There's, as just to tell everyone, there's generally two types of cases. There's one where people are seeking what I call damages. They're seeking money, or they're seeking not necessarily damage, but they're seeking dollars for, let's say, the city of San Francisco has to build a seawall. And those cases are being brought to get some form of monetary recovery. And then there's our cases. So we didn't say this, but none of these plaintiffs are hoping to make a dime on any of these cases. We're seeking money from the governments that we're suing. We're trying to stop government action that is harming these plaintiffs and their generation. So it's court orders like injunctive relief and declaratory relief, but not damage. So if you look at cases internationally, some are seeking monetary relief or damages, and others are seeking for the government to change its ongoing practices. And it's in that latter category that the cases our Children's Trust brings fall.
Right. And I see a question here. This is for Delaney and Eva, I believe. Do you have faith in the courts to do the right thing and give a verdict in your and everyone's favor? And a follow-up, in case you do you believe there will be a material change, especially with this administration acting for their own benefit with impunity?
Yes, another great question. Yes, I have faith in the courts. Eva can testify to the success that she had in Montana through the court system. And at this point, we have to have faith in the courts because our legislative and executive branches of government have failed us. So we have nowhere else to turn but the judicial branch. So I really do think that we have a really strong case here with Lighthiser, and All of our attorneys are very confident about how the hearing went last week, and we're excited to see how Judge Christensen rules. Whether or not there will be material change afterwards, that will be up to the federal government to see if they want to follow the federal court's ruling, if he does rule in our favor. And if he doesn't, then I'm sure there will be more judicial action, legislative action that we will take. But
Right.
that's can't know that right now.
And to clarify, we really don't have any idea when the judge will rule. Is that right? There's no time limit here, is there?
Correct. We were told maybe within a month or so, but that's not a deadline that the judge has. He has a lot of evidence to go through, so he'll take his time, and I don't blame him for it.
Yeah, yeah. Eva, do you have faith that this will have a good outcome?
Delaney said it absolutely beautifully.
Yeah.
I think it's, it's essential that we do rely on the judicial branch right now, and that we don't walk away from our Constitution. It's so important that we uphold these fundamental rights that we have.
Right, exactly. Another question is, what are your reactions to President Trump's remarks at the UN yesterday? Those were exciting, calling climate change the greatest con job perpetrated on the world and making false statements about renewable energy. Anyone?
Sure. It's disgraceful, and it's embarrassing to the entire United States of America and in front of the entire world. Nonetheless, it's appalling that those statements were made, but also not surprising. We know he's against renewable energy. We know that he thinks climate change is a hoax. He said that years ago. And his executive orders are directly trying to block renewable energy like solar and wind. So we know all these things. And while it's quite unfortunate and embarrassing for our country, I'm hopeful that this lawsuit will maybe hopefully try to, despite his rhetoric and beliefs about climate change, will hopefully help us try to make some headway in the realm of transitioning to renewable energies and becoming a leader in the world on that front. But until then, vote in the next election.
We have another question for you from Lisa Oliver, who wants to know how polarized, divided are Florida residents on the climate crisis? What is the possibility of making the climate crisis a voting issue in Florida?
That is a great question. Right now, at the state level, climate change is a quite polarizing issue. For the last 16 years, we've had a governor who has denied two governors, each with 8 years in their terms, who have denied climate change, one of them has actually banned any government officials from using the terms climate change, sea level rise, or global warming within governmental use, which was crazy. And then our current governor repealed the renewable energy rule that we worked on just last year. He's also outlawed wind energy in the state. We don't have any wind energy here in Florida. So it's been quite a battle, and that's because our utility companies kind of have a monopoly. We have 3 that are very large, one specifically that is very large in the state, and they rely on mostly natural gas to produce their energy, and so they have their hands in the pockets of our state officials. But I do want to share that just a few days ago, an article came out in the Florida Phoenix, which is a fantastic news source. And the title is New Survey Shows Majority of Florida GOP Voters Back Clean Energy Initiatives. So while it is a polarizing issue, there is hope that this is a voting issue for Florida in the future.
And I think I've read that in Florida, where they're most susceptible to flooding and have already experienced it, they are actually raising the sidewalks and so forth. So they're preparing for it, but they're still denying it, right? That doesn't make
Correct. Yes.
lot of
Well,
sense.
at the grassroots level, like in Miami Beach, which is where they've raised the roads and sidewalks and installed pumping stations, our municipal leaders are trying to do as much as they can, but it is difficult with the state level situation. But yes, we're trying to do as much as we can at the grassroots level, and so things are getting done. but those are only short-term solutions, maybe 20, 30 years worth of adaptation. And then when seas continue to rise, we'll have a whole new issue, more flooding on top of that. So it's all short-term stuff, but there are efforts that are being made locally.
Now, I wanted to ask also, what do you need to do? What do we all need to do to get more young people to pay attention to this issue and influence their legislators? You know, it is a problem to get young people involved in politics a lot of the time, but you have a compelling case to make. Any suggestions?
Sure, I can start, and then Eva, if you want to add anything, feel free. I think the best way is to educate them young about climate change and climate science and the impacts that people are facing all over the world. Of course, educating them about what is going on locally in their own community and state helps as well, just so that they know. So if they're in California, I'm sure they're already learning about wildfires because they're living with the reality of it. So teaching them the science behind that, why it's happening more frequently is probably really important. And then also potentially engaging with nonprofit organizations. There are a lot of great nonprofits that have a youth component where they try to get them engaged or learn how to interact with policymakers, write letters, write them emails. So there's lots of great ways for youth to become involved that doesn't necessarily involve litigation.
Okay, that's great.
And it's unfortunate, but Eva, just give me one second. It's unfortunate that many youth want to get involved because they are experiencing the wildfire smoke. They are seeing the droughts. They want to get involved, but they don't know how. And I really think that organizations like Sustainable San Mateo County are so wonderful in reaching out to youth and to giving youth an opportunity not only to learn, but to have their voices heard. And Eva, I'll turn it over to you.
I think that Delaney and Phil both kind of summed up sort of what I was thinking. I feel like being able, when you're a young person, it's the climate crisis as a whole is such a massive global issue and it feels really, really intimidating. So it's hard to know where to start. Like, even if you are interested, like, yeah, like Phil said, it's finding ways to engage. That's a difficult thing to figure out in the first place. So, yeah, like local community actions, I feel like are so important with, yeah, local nonprofits, local initiatives who are doing something about um, local issues and working kind of from the ground up, I feel like is a good way to kind of introduce young people to climate issues.
Yeah, and I'll add, we work with a lot of high school and college interns, and we train them to do in-depth research on possible solutions to climate and other sustainability issues. And they really have trouble at first learning the professional skills and talking in person to people, especially since the pandemic has been a challenge for some of them. But they come back later and they tell us, I feel so much better because I have learned I'm doing something about it. And I'm going to devote my career to this issue. So we feel like we really are helping them. Kathleen, I see you have your hand up. Can you? Yeah, there you go.
Hi. Thank you. You guys are so impressive. Following up on that point about it is so important to get involved. Action is the best antidote to despair. I'm curious to know how the young people involved in these cases got involved. Now, it sounds like Delaney was doing her own thing with the nonprofit and had a lot going and probably had made a bit of a name for herself there. Eva, how did you get involved in the Held case in the first place? And any thoughts on how some of the other folks have gotten involved? I've always been curious about that.
That's a good question because it happened long enough ago that I don't really remember how I heard about our Children's Trust. I know that they had, I believe, some outreach in Montana, and I think I heard about it through a local nonprofit. So as for the other plaintiffs, I can't remember, but we definitely heard about it through, I think, yeah, like I heard about it through an environmental nonprofit who already kind of had a touch on, or like a pulse on, kind of the happenings Yeah, that's probably the best I can answer it. But yeah, getting involved in this it was long enough ago that I barely remember.
So there was the case and they were looking for people. Okay, I get it.
Well,
Thank
what
you. Film it.
what typically happens is we get the word out that we're considering bringing a case, and through schools like science teachers, through youth groups, that a number of states have youth or climate organizations, or word of mouth on social media, 350.org, or the various youth groups nationally and internationally. Uh, they direct people to us, and we start interviewing them and explaining the upsides and downsides of being a plaintiff. And it's a fascinating process. And as you see, our plaintiffs are pretty amazing people.
They
Indeed.
are. And I've
Indeed.
been so interested in what you're saying, I've lost track of the time. We we have to wind this up. So we're going to ask you to take just a quick poll, and then you're going to do the poll first, I thought, Jill. And I also want to mention, while we're waiting for that, that the presentations by Citizens Climate Lobby are involving students at many schools throughout our county. And Elaine Solinger is doing an awesome job with that project. There is one other question: if environmental science is taught in schools in Montana and Florida, can you tell us quickly if that's the case or not?
In Florida, maybe a private school if you're lucky. I know that in Broward County, they've tried to start to introduce it, and it's starting to become a thing in Miami-Dade County as well. But it's county specific, and it's more difficult for public schools, again, because of our state leadership.
Okay, I think we're having a little trouble with our poll, so I will just close
Yeah,
by
can you not see the poll? It says, looks like
Yeah.
some people can, but let me try and
really.
launch it again.
Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you very, very much for coming and sharing your personal experiences. This has really been a moving presentation. And I want to close. There's your poll.
Oh, there
I'll
we
let you take a quick do at that. Okay, and just remind you about things we have coming up if you want to get involved, because the key to making change is doing something about it, as Michelle Obama so eloquently said. We have on September 30th the deadline for applications for our Youth Advisory Council. These are youths throughout San Mateo County. October 1st is the date of our Indicators launch event. It is a free breakfast event in Redwood City, and you will get to see the results of this very interesting report with a whole panel of experts on the topic. And then October 14th is the deadline for our Sustainability Awards nominations. And we encourage you to go to our website and do check it out. We are looking for more nominations. And thank you everybody so much. Let's give them some applause with our little share button here. the react button, I mean. So thank you so much. We really, really appreciate all the time you spent putting this together and taking time out of your busy schedules to educate us all. So thanks very, very much.